Welcome everyone to 5 Nights of Frights. I'm Miss Joy, and I'm lucky enough to have my good friend Mrs. Moore here to read with me. We are going to read the first chapter of one of our cover-to-cover books. It's called Guest. It's by Mary Downing Hahn, and we want to thank Clarion Publishers for allowing us to read this to you tonight. Let's start.
Sounds good.
Okay. Am I going first? Okay. Chapter 1. I was in a temper fit to blow the lid off a kettle of boiling water. And who wouldn't be? Since sunup, I'd been doing chores. I'd milked the cow, hauled 2 buckets of water from the well, fed the chickens, and then fought the hens for their eggs. Now I was down on my knees, sweat-soaked and bug-bitten, yanking weeds from the vegetable patch. My hands were caked with mud, and my nose was burned as red as a strawberry. Midges hummed around my face and bit my ears.
Wiping the sweat from my eyes, I yanked a thistle out of its roots, only to see 2 more hiding in the beans. I scowled at my baby brother Thomas, who lay nearby on the grass. "You," I muttered. "If it weren't for you, I'd be down the lane, skipping rope from the village girls. But oh no, I must watch you and do chores as if I were a servant. You've ruined my life, that's what you've done. It's a wicked thing to say, but sometimes I wish you'd never been born."
Thomas smiled at me and cooed as if I'd praised him. Ashamed, I clapped my hand over my mouth and hoped Ma'am hadn't heard me. But she was in the cottage, singing at her loom, weaving soft blankets to keep Thomas warm when winter came.
I watched Thomas playing with his toes and chuckling to himself. Truth to tell, he was a sweet baby. I'd be lying if I said he wasn't. He never fussed, never cried. He ate when he was fed and slept the whole night through. And he was beautiful, even though no one said so. When visitors came, they leaned over the cradle and frowned and scowled and shook their heads.
"'Tis a pity he's so ugly and puny," they'd say.
"Oh yes, he's a sickly one. He'll not live past his first year.
"And such a nasty temper he's got.
No good will come of him."
If I caught a fish half as ugly as that poor baby, I'd throw it back."
It was as if each visitor tried to come up with a worse insult than the one before, and all the while Ma'am and Dado and I smiled and nodded in agreement, for all of us, even the youngest, knew it was bad luck to compliment a baby. Since the day my brother was born, I'd be warned not to speak of his pretty curls or his blue eyes or his dimples. I mustn't boast of his sweet nature or praise him in any way.
It was the kind folk we feared. Although no one in our village had seen them for many a year, they could be far away or just outside the cottage door. They were sly and full of tricks, and no matter what we called them, they were far from kind, though no one dared say that aloud either. If we spoke of them at all, it was to say that they were wise, they were beautiful, they were brave and noble and honest in their dealings, when in truth, if we offended them, they burned our barns and cottages, stole our livestock, sent plagues to sicken us, cursed our fields with thistles, lamed our horses, and dried up our cow's milk.
Worst of all, if the kind folk learned of a beautiful baby boy's birth, they'd steal him away and leave one of their own sickly creatures in his place. And what misery the changeling would bring to its new mother. As if it weren't bad enough that her own sweet baby was gone, Changeling screamed and cried and bit and pinched and broke things. She'd have no rest. That poor mother, no joy.
And so, we did our best to keep Thomas safe. I watched him while Ma'am did her housework, and she and Dado watched him at night. We never even whispered sweet things to him for fear the kind folk would come for him. Their spies were everywhere. Long-eared rabbits listened in the hedges, and sharp-eyed crows watched from chimney tops. Toads in ponds, fish in streams, foxes slinking by, any and all might carry messages to the kind folk.
I stabbed my trowel into the dirt and dug out a stubborn thistle. I shouldn't have spoken so crossly to Thomas. He was too young to understand my words, but he must have heard the anger in my voice. A crow cawed, and I looked up to see him perched in a tree over my head. He ruffled his black wings and stared down at me. His dark eyes reflected a sliver of light. Keeping watch on me, he cawed again. It sounded as if he were laughing at me.
Suddenly anxious, I glanced at Thomas. He just learned to sit up, and he was looking at me to make sure I'd noticed. A small chain he always wore around his neck lay in the grass. Its silver locket sparkled in the sunlight.
Dropping the trowel, I ran to fetch the locket. Old Granny Hedgepath gave you this, Thomas. You're not to take it off. You'd best do what that old witch says, or she'll eat you for dinner. Thomas laughed and clapped his hands. What did he know of witches and their ways?
I tried to slip the necklace over his head, but he grabbed the chain and held it out for me to take. Giving things to people was his new game. Most people, including me, gave them back. But Matthew down the lane had run home with the wooden cow Dado had carved for Thomas. I'd gone to his house and asked him for it.
Babby gave it to me, Matthew wailed. Luckily for Thomas, but not for Matthew, his man snatched the toy cow, handed it to me, and gave Matthew a smack. I took the chain from Thomas and smiled without thinking. I said, "Oh, Thomas, you're so sweet. How could I ever be vexed with you? You're the best baby in the world and the prettiest." When I tried again to slip the chain over his head, he ducked away, laughing.
I held the necklace out, but instead of continuing the struggle, I sat in the grass and admired the necklace. The silver chain was finally made, and the heart-shaped locket was decorated all over with a cunning pattern of vines and flowers. I sighed. It was much too pretty to waste on a boy.
In truth, I'd wanted the locket from the day Granny Hedgepath fastened the chain around my brother's neck. "Make sure Thomas wears this always," she told Ma'am. "Never remove it. He must eat and sleep with it around his neck. Even when you bathe him, make sure the locket stays fastened. It will protect him from mischief."
Placing her bony hand on Thomas's head, Granny added, "May the kind folk of the forest find joy elsewhere and ignore this poor, ugly baby."
I was watching Granny from my shadowy corner, neither moving nor speaking. It frightened me to look at her, but she drew my eyes like the evil cockatrice. Her white hair was wild and uncombed. Sticks and leaves poked out of its tangles. She had long yellow fingernails as sharp as a hawk's talons, and her eyes were sunken so deep in their sockets I couldn't tell their color.
Some said the old woman was a healer. Others said she was a witch, but everyone in the village agreed she knew magic and spells and walked in Mirkwood at midnight. They also knew not to anger her.
Suddenly, Granny turned to me in the corner. "Why are you sulking there, girl? I see your sly eyes. I hear the beat of your jealous heart. The necklace is for your brother. You have no need for it."
She spoke as if I were a wicked girl, a bad sister, someone not to be trusted. Even though it was rude, I turned my head away and scowled at the floor. How had Granny guessed I wanted that necklace? It belonged around my neck, not my brother's.
After Granny left, Ma'am said, "You shamed me, Molly. I've taught you to smile and curtsy when you see Granny Hedgepath, but you did neither. What must she think of you?"
I don't care what she thinks. Did you not hear what she said to me? She was hateful and rude.
"No, it was you who was hateful and rude." Ma'am looked at me. "I hope you haven't made an enemy of that old woman."
I don't care if I have. I'm not afraid of her. If Ma'am had Granny's skill, she'd have known I was indeed scared of the old woman. I knew full well I should have been polite, but my tongue had a way of getting away from me. I said what I thought and didn't think about the consequences until it was too late.
Now, far away from Granny's prying eyes, I held the necklace up and watched it sparkle in the sunlight. "You want me to wear this, don't you?" I asked Thomas. "That's why you gave it to me."
He smiled so widely I saw the buds of new teeth pushing up through his pink gums. Surely Thomas wouldn't come to harm if I wore the necklace for just a few moments. With care, I undid the clasp and fastened the chain around my neck. How beautiful it was.
I should have given the necklace back to Thomas, but instead I tucked it inside my dress. I liked the smooth feel of the locket against my skin. Just for a little while, I thought, what harm could come to Thomas with me so near?
It seemed at least a dozen thistles had sprouted while my back was turned. Their thorny stems hurt my hands and their roots held the soil tightly. I tugged and tugged until my back hurt from bending over. If I did much more weeding, I'd be an old woman before I even grew up. I'd hobble around in ragged clothes and end up as crazy as Granny Hedgepath.
While I worked, a large cloud drifted across the sun and plunged the garden into its shadow. At the same time, the breeze dropped and a strange silence fell. No leaves rustled. Chickens stopped clucking and disappeared into their coop. No birds sang, no bees hummed in the clover. The colors of flowers and grass, trees and sky faded to gray. Worried, I got to my feet to check on Thomas. Suddenly, the world seemed to spin and lurch. Colors blurred and ran together. I saw two of everything. The sky was beneath me, the grass above me. Too dizzy to stand, I fell to the ground. The last thing I heard was a crow laughing.
Ooh.
That sounds awesome.
Thanks for reading, everybody. To read more, find out what happens, Guest. You can get it at the library. Good night.